feel the potency of this place.
As the birthplace of the Sith, and basically the dark side in general, Korriban holds many secrets within its hallowed halls. The dark side runs strong in the veins and rocks of this desolate planet located in the wilds of Sith space. However, in my personal opinion, none of these secrets held in the embrace of Korriban are as preserved and present as the Valley of the Dark Lords. Originally known as the Valley of the Sleeping Kings, this monumentous structure has been rebuilt and destroyed time and time again. Built thousands of years before Yoda was ever born, thousands of years before Craig, before Luke, before even the Chosen One. This Valley of the Dark Lords has existed as long as the Sith purebloods have, for them to commemorate their dead in this Valley of Tombs and Darkness. So today, join us as we embark on a quest through this entire valley, excavating the tombs of the ancient Dark Lords, discovering Darkside artifacts, and discovering why the Valley of the Dark Lords is the most important Sith sacred site the galaxy has ever seen. Originally known as the Valley of the Sleeping Kings, was a valley and burial ground of the Sith Lords of Korriban. Originally constructed by the planet's natives as a burial ground for their kings 25,000 years before the Jedi, the exiles of the Jedi Order, who came to be known as the Jansarai, Dark Lords of the Sith, added their own tombs to the valley, along with 7 prominent tombs and locations. The valley was home to the ancient Sith Great Temple and the Sith Academy, which loomed over the valley for several millennia. Kreia comments on the Valley of the Sleeping Kings. Be careful, dark energy fills these ruins, and even the fallen Sith live still. Built long before the arrival of the exiles of the Jedi Order in 6900 BBY, the Valley of the Sleeping Kings, what would eventually be renamed to the Valley of the Dark Lords, was located in a sheer rock valley on the planet Korriban, where it just contained remnants of 1,000 kings long dead. Smoothing the walls of the valley and fashioning giant statues of humanoid shape, the Sith of Korriban long buried their rulers in the stone tombs deep within the walls of the valley. At the conclusion of the conflict known as the 100-Year Darkness, which saw the 12 Jedi exiles exiled to Korriban after they embraced darkside alchemy and studies under the leadership of Ajunta Pol. A war fought far from Korriban, the exiles as they were called, after being banished from the space controlled by the Galactic Republic by the Jedi, landed on this dusty world, numbering only 11. The exiles were welcomed as gods by the primitive Sith, and eventually took up the titles of Dark Lords of the Sith, sovereign demigods and divine beings to the menial Sith purebloods. As although the Sith purebloods' strength in the Force ran strong, it was nowhere near the might of a true Sith master. Founding the first Sith Empire in existence after killing King Hakagam Grash, Ajunta Pol took control of the Empire and was worshipped and feared by his followers, even above the likes of King Adas, a Sith god who was believed to be the Sith Ari who had driven off the Rakata single-handedly almost 20,000 years prior. Following the death of Lord Pol, a mausoleum was erected in the center of the valley in honor of him, separate from the line of kings which were housed in the walls of the ancient edifices. Marked with runes and ancient spells, as well as runic symbols. The stone housed Paul's body against the destructive heat of the outside world, preserving the bones and spirit of the ancient Sith Lord. Eventually, Lord Tulak Hord, who many of you will remember as one of the greatest lightsaber duelists of all time, came to control the Empire, ruling from Korriban, and known as the Lord of Hate. This Lord placed his loyal servant Kem Val in stasis within an old tomb within the walls of the valley, before he himself was laid to rest there after being backstabbed by his apprentice. Over time, they would see the addition of a tomb for Lord Marco Ragnos, and an ancient tomb containing a star map of the Infinite Empire ruled by the Rakata was converted to hold the remains of Naga Sadao, although he was never laid to rest within it as he would die before it would ever be used. Also, sometime around the time of Tulak Hord, we have to mention Darth Andedu. Darth Andedu, of course, the most paranoid Sith to have ever lived, and some have cited one of the most foolish, is absolutely a Sith we need to mention. As a pure Sith scholar, Darth Andedu was so fearful of his predecessors and underlings rising up against him, that he built himself a false tomb located in the Valley of the Dark Lords. And although the Sith purebloods and his subjects eventually understood this was a fake tomb, they never eventually found Andedu, as he had retreated to the deep core world of Prakat, a near impossible location to discover. Following the reign of Marka Ragnos and what many would consider the golden age of the Sith Empire, the Empire was fractured during a costly war of vengeance against the Galactic Republic and the Jedi Order under Naga Sadow, the new Dark Lord of the Sith, who initiated the Great Hyperspace War, and although victory would seem it was in their grasp, Naga Sadow's own foolishness and idiocy caused the Sith Empire to be driven back to Sith space, incurring the Sith Holocaust. When Sadow abandoned Korriban and a sizable portion of the fleet to hide on Droman Cast in fear for his own life, the Republic Navy attacked the valley, and a counter-invasion was sanctioned by Supreme Chancellor Paul Timo, the leader of the Republic at that time. As the valley burned in ruin, the Sith regrouped beyond the arm of the Republic, and prepared to seek revenge on their persecutors for desecrating the most sacred Sith site in existence. Now we come to the time of Revan, as Visas Ma describes. It seems quiet, just the wind, but deep beneath the surface you can feel the pain of what took place here. There is great power in this place, for those who can hear its call. Over the ensuing centuries, the valley was visited by brave robbers and treasure seekers who infiltrated the defences of the tombs and stole priceless artifacts from the ancient Sith Empire's stronghold. Although we are not aware what explicit artifacts they stole, we know they stole an assortment of artifacts, scrolls, and tablets, possibly containing Sith lore, which corrupted them into dark side acolytes. The valley would not be inhabited by Dark Lords of the Sith until the former Jedi Knight Revan entered the valley with his own apprentice Darth Malak, with their own Imperial host. Re-establishing the famous Sith Academy that had stood thousands of years prior at the valley's back wall, the Sith began churning out Sith to fight in Revan's war with the Jedi Order, previously here in the Mandalorian Wars. After the enactment of the mass shadow generator, Revan had fallen to the dark side, and was now waging a war on the Republic, one that would bring the Jedi to his knees. When Revan was captured and redeemed by the Jedi, he was dispatched to Korriban in the guise of a Sith apprentice, and infiltrated the Academy in order to gain access to the tombs, retrieving a wide plethora of artifacts such as the Blade of Ajunta Paul and the Holocron of Tulak Hord. Revan managed to escape the valley undetected. One of the notable encounters in this is Revan actually encountered the spirit of Ajunta Paul, persuading him to go back to the light after Ajunta expressed his feelings that the Sith were failing, and that the Sith Order, as he originally intended, had died out long ago, and that the hiding of Vishian was nothing to be proud of. However, Revan persuaded him to go back to the light side, and Tulak Hord, as well as Ajunta Paul, became one with the Force once again. When the war came to a sudden end with the death of Darth Malak aboard the Starfall, the Academy was abandoned as the remaining Sith fled persecution. During the Dark Wars, the Sith Triumvirate did not return to Korriban and the First Jedi Purge, though some Sith acolytes still roamed the Academy's halls seeking ancient knowledge. Jedi Knight and exile Mitra Surik travelled to the valley in search of Master Loana Vash. Most of the tomb's entrances had caved in, with the exception of the burial chamber of Ludo Kresh, which remained positively largely unscathed. In 3681 BBY, after centuries of cowering and hiding and building up their military, the Sith Empire, as led by Emperor Valkorion, or Vishian, returned in force to the galaxy and retook Korriban. In a stunning orbital battle, Sith Lord Vindican, as well as his apprentice Darth Malgus, conquered the world and wiped out the Republic's forces stationed at the orbital facility. First engaging Jedi Master and Battlemaster Keo Sendarach and his apprentice Satil Shan, Malgus and Vindican took them on, and although Satil managed to escape and Vindican was struck down, Malgus dealt the finishing blow to Keo Sendarach in a burst of rage. However, the orbital facility charged with maintaining the planetary quarantine was absolutely annihilated, causing the Republic to lose their hold on the world. As the Sith resettled the valley, the Academy reopened and began producing Sith to fight the Republic and the Jedi in the ongoing Great Galactic War, a war that would take nearly 3 decades in total to reach its end, when the Treaty of Coruscant was signed and a Cold War was waged. A life on Korriban thrived as a training ground for the Sith and their soldiers alike, causing the Empire to produce more and more powerful Sith Lords as the dark energy on Korriban continued to strengthen. As the Cold War went on, the excavation of the valley progressed significantly under the guidance of Darth Thanatos, a leading member of the Sith Empire, and one of its premier generals. To the dismay of the Sith, a great number of claw slugs had invested the valley, and the lower tombs, while Tukata protected the higher tombs from grave robbers, vestiges of old Sith alchemical experimentation with biological mutations. The Academy and the Sith flourished for many years, and throughout the Galactic War until the Empire's final defeat. After the Sith were vanquished, the Jedi pillaged the valley and confiscated or destroyed all remaining relics they could find, bringing an end to much of the work accomplished by the Sith over the past 3 millennia, an event that would later be known as the Sith Holocaust. For more information on that, check out another video I made of the only time the entire Jedi Order turned to the dark side, but I'll try to summarize it here. The Sith Holocaust was a major event that occurred in the history of the Star Wars franchise during the Old Republic era. Immediately after the Great Hyperspace War, the Galactic Republic and the Jedi Order reigned victorious, but the Supreme Chancellor had noticed there were still surviving remnants of the Empire and sent in the Republic and Jedi forces to wipe the planet out. This quote goes as follows from Jedi Master Ghost Jurral on the Sith Holocaust. It was at this moment that the Republic made what might now be considered a mistake. The Sith no longer posed a threat to the Republic, but the Supreme Chancellor was unsatisfied. Jedi and Republic forces were sent to Korriban and the other Sith planets to ensure no remnants of the Sith Empire remained. And so they bombarded the entire planet, finishing the Sith Holocaust that they had started nearly 2,000 years earlier at the conclusion of the Great Hyperspace War. But now, we go to the next area of this Valley of the Dark Lord, that being the Brotherhood of Darkness. As the new Sith Empire and the Republic battled ceaselessly for generations, the Sith meticulously remained separated from the original world, under the leadership of Sith Lord Shia Khan and the reorganized Brotherhood of Darkness. The Sith took back Korriban in a stunning victory, which left all Jedi and Republic soldiers on the battlefield dead. They found the valley desolate, having been largely ignored by generations of Dark Lords. Darksiders during the new Sith Wars seldom, if ever, visited the site, as centuries of looting and conflict had largely desecrated anything of value, leaving only whispers of Darkside lore that Darth Bane himself would eventually discover. Under Khan's leadership, and the works of Lords Cordus and Copex, Korriban was reinvigorated, and the Academy reopened in a new building in 1006 BBY, around the time that Darth Bane would eventually come to Korriban. As the Sith flocked to Korriban and sent hundreds through the Academy system, the valley remained largely abandoned, as the Masters believed it to be empty of all relics or secrets that could aid in the war effort, seeing it as a desolate reminder of an era-long past, and one that had to be discarded. Nonetheless, a headstrong and powerful student named Bane, who had expressed a sensitivity in the Force matching Master Yoda and Darth Revan's, defied his master's order and made the treacherous journey from the city of Dresde in hopes of uncovering ancient knowledge and secrets of the dark side to further his studies. While on Korriban, Bane felt the gentle hum of the dark side that permeated the air and hoped it would intensify within the valley itself. Instead, Bane found that the air within the valley had grown still, and that the dark side retreated from the ancient edifices and tombs long ago. Searching the valley for knowledge for 13 days, Bane concluded that the wealth of the valley had long ago disappeared, and abandoned it forever. Darth Plagueis commented on the Valley of the Dark Lords almost a millennia later at the climaxation of the Rule of Two. Of course there are tombs in the Valley of the Dark Lords, but they have been plundered, and now draw only tourists. Since the Ruusan reformations of the Galactic Senate, Korriban and the valley remained largely depopulated and seldom visited as the Jedi Order entered a golden age of prosperity and peace, while under the Rule of Two and Darth Bane, as well as his apprentice Zana, and the remaining Sith were deep in hiding. Force adepts interested in the dark side sought out the treacherous treasures hidden deep in Korriban's tombs. Most visitors were lost in the valley forever, never to emerge, lost in insanity trying to uncover the secrets that would grant them more power. But in 23 BBY, approximately 9 years after the events of the Naboo Crisis, a team of Jedi Knights and their Padawans, headed by Obi-Wan Kenobi, entered the Valley of the Dark Lords, and after having visited the ancient Sith Academy, while on a mission to track down galactic criminals Granta Omega and Genazan Arbor. Upon entering the Academy's ancient ruins, Kenobi felt a distinct Sith presence and disturbance in the Force, the dark shape of a Sith Lord, though he did not realize it at the time. This later proved to have been Darth Tyrannus, the Sith alter ego of Count Dooku, who was there on Korriban to rendezvous with Omega and Zan Arbor. The two criminals were seeking to strike an alliance of power with the galaxy's re-emergent Sith, becoming dark side acolytes in themselves. As 18-year-old Anakin Skywalker looked out towards the greyness of the Valley of the Dark Lords from the Academy's landing platform, he felt the beating heart of the Sith Lord reach out, calling to him. Its pull was powerful, insistent, irresistible for the young, ambitious Skywalker. The Jedi team aboard a borrowed Commercial air speeder, the Republic cruisers having just exploded from sabotage by the two bounty hunters, within the hour and before dusk, pursuing Omega and Zan to the Valley of the Dark Lords. There, they at last confronted the long-sought criminals in a final showdown, and having spent many years tracking them both, for both Omega and Zan Arabor had somehow always managed, at the last moment, to escape the Jedi's clutches. As the Jedi entered the valley properly, a dark wave of power hit them, causing them to stop. It fractured the force they felt around them, tearing at it like rabid dogs. The dark side of the force was more concentrated than they expected it to be, more potent and powerful. The Sith tombs that inhabited the valley were designed to amplify dark side energy, and the Jedi could feel that physical presence press against their chests, instinctively making them reach for their lightsaber hilts. It was only after battling their way through Tentukata beasts, those fabled Sith sentinels of terror that had guarded the tombs millennium ago, that they were able to proceed down the mausoleum-lined valley. The dark energies of the dead Sith lords, as well as their corpses and tombs, having awoken to the Jedi's presence, poured from the mausoleums. The Jedi could practically taste their anger, cruelty, and pain. Millennium of meticulous waiting had finally paid off, and yet they were dead, unable to enact their revenge on the Jedi that had desecrated their tombs. Obi-Wan Kenobi reached out with the Force and detected the mausoleum that Omega and Zan had gone into for their secret meeting with Darth Tyrannus, the secret Sith Lord. Once the Jedi had entered, the Dark Lord's whispers grew louder as they advanced. Rising from their crumbling tombs, the Sith Lords approached the Jedi, their shroud rags falling away, their mouths gaping like zombified husks, their hands grasping, their whispers taunting the intruders. But then the spectres merely disintegrated onto the Jedi with foul smells and taste. The dark side of the Force felt as thick as a curtain, however, and slowed the Jedi's movement as if it were a physical presence. The Jedi soon encountered dark energy traps, concentrations of dark side power that appeared as faint shimmers of purple in the air. These, of course, could immobilize a Force-sensitive being for a time, but the Jedi were able to steer clear of them with quick thinking and Kenobi's advance warning. But suddenly, Omega appeared from behind the tomb, arrogant, cruel, sure of himself, laughing in a vengeful derision. Zan Arbor was there too, in the shadows. Kenobi held their gaze with no desire to speak, though without anger. He simply wouldn't respond to Omega's taunts, but rather he held fast to his grim commitment to finish this unsavory but necessary task. It was time to rid the galaxy of this heinous scourge, once and for all. Conjuring a platoon of Korriban zombies, Obi-Wan first had to fight through these, released by the Sith Lord in the wings to stall them. The Jedi Master broke through the advance on the criminals, but Omega and Zan had slipped away into the shadows around the back of the tomb, and appeared again from behind, as did the Sith Lord, who stood waiting for them at the tomb's entrance. The three villains were about to escape through the mausoleum's front door. Tragedy struck, however, when Padawan Darathel Tunnis was killed by Omega, due to Padawan Trude Veld's faulty lightsaber that Padawan Ferris Olin was using as backup to cover his fellow Jedi. While Zan Arbor eventually fled behind the protective barrier of the Sith Lord's blue force lighting and crackling voltage, Omega stood firm, refusing to give up this chance to avenge himself for what he erroneously perceived to be his father Xanos' death at the hands of the Jedi. Although Omega temporarily blinded him in a flash of Lumblast rocket, Kenobi, recovering from the blast, stood to face his longtime nemesis in a final showdown. Wildly powering E-Web heavy repeating blaster fire and wrist rockets, Kenobi drove through the distraction to achieve his somber aim. But because Omega was not aware of his own weapon's potential defects, as Obi-Wan surely was, he was utterly unprepared for the grim consequences of his ignorance. That the weapon, overburdened, could turn against itself by overloading, shutting down, and backblasting, which it did. The resulting explosion slammed Omega into a tomb wall, breaking his body in a shower of sparks. The ever-resilient arch-villain, refusing yet to surrender to death, lurched forward one last time with blaster fire, swearing to Kenobi that because the Jedi had killed his father, Kenobi could not win. Resigned to what fate lay before him now, for no matter how much he'd wished to stop Omega, he'd never wished to kill him. Obi-Wan struck the killing blow, seeing it as mercy. Granted Omega's last words as he curled up as a child and let go of life, though still holding on to his hatred and rage for the Jedi. Do you think you won? You didn't. I know who he is. You will wish you did. Intimidated strongly the Sith, whose identity Omega professed to know, perhaps even that of the Sith's own Dark Master, Insidious, was more perilous than Kenobi could possibly imagine. The Jedi mission to Korriban's Valley of the Dark Lords ended with both Genazan, Arbor, and the hidden Sith escaping. Later, undercover Jedi Knight Quinlan Voss infiltrated the Valley and discovered the lost holocron of Heresis, before turning it over for study to the Dark Lord of the Sith Darth Tyrannus and his current Sith Master. Around 20 BBY, Grandmaster Yoda visited the Valley and went to the tomb of Sith Lord Darth Bane, centuries after his death, encountering his disembodied spirit. Following the rise of the Galactic Empire and the defeat of the Republic and the Jedi Order, Darth Sidious seldom visited the ancient crypts. It is also important to note that sometime during this time, Palpatine went to Korriban and was nearly killed by the Sith spirits there. But space was reserved for him and his apprentice Darth Vader in the Great Temple's ancient tombs. However, when he did visit, Sidious performed rituals in the temple to build up his power and commune with his long-dead predecessors, forcing out secrets of the dark side that had not been known since the time of Vitiate. A single visitor escaped the notice of Sidious during this time. A former Jedi Master named Asherad Het crashed in the valley and rediscovered the lost tomb of Zozan. If you're familiar with the story of Asherad, you would know he would eventually become the Sith Lord Darth Krayt, Luke Skywalker's primary rival. One of the original Sith Lords is Zozan. Making contact with Zozan's spirits, Het began training in the ways of the Sith and began accruing dark side power. In 4 ABY, Han Solo had concocted and brewed a plan to send a strike team to the surface of the Endor moon in a stolen Imperial shuttle and deactivate the shield generator that was currently protecting the Death Star 2 from any attacks. Alliance High Command needed more information about the Imperial garrison on the Forest Moon before they were sent, and only one man had that information, Emperor Sheev Palpatine. Palpatine, secretly a Dark Lord in disguise, had planned a pilgrimage to the valley before completing his journey to the Death Star. Renegade Squadron volunteered for a raid on his shuttle to get that intelligence. After they had landed, Renegade Squadron attacked the Sith Academy to keep the stormtroopers stationed there from alerting Sidious of the current situation. They held the Academy as the Emperor entered the atmosphere. Once he had landed, Renegade Squadron moved into a Sith tomb and primed explosive charges at the entrances and started destroying Sith artifacts to goad Palpatine into the tomb. When the plan worked, Sidious unleashed Force Lightning to quickly dispatch a Mon Calamari before leaping into the fray. Renegade Squadron retreated from the tomb and sent off the explosives, trapping the Dark Lord inside while they assaulted his shuttle and stole a datapad containing the troop information. After getting the datapad back to a low-altitude assault transport, it was revealed that Emperor Palpatine himself was to be on the Death Star at the time of the attack. In 11 ABY, Palpatine actually did pay a visit in his reanimated clone body, stating the following: "It has been 10 years since I last stood on this lost world. It is still a place potent with power." Following Sidious's first death above Endor and the treachery of Darth Vader, the Dark Lord returned after his spirit inhabited a clone body in 11 ABY, travelling to the valley to seek guidance and hoping to revitalize his failing clone form. Sidious sought knowledge in the Great Temple. The spirits of the Sith Lords invited Sidious to join them in their eternal unrest, and beckoned for Darth Vader to take his place on the throne of the dead, despite the fact that he was killed sometime before by Palpatine's Force Lightning. Sidious refused the spirits and planned to reconquer the galaxy with his new galaxy gun and world devastators, as well as his dark empire. He was nearly unstoppable. A few years later, in 14 ABY, the Valley received a massive restoration effort by the Disciples of Ragnos, a fanatical cult dedicated to the memory of long-dead Sith Lord Marco Ragnos, who we discussed earlier in the video. Discovering unopened tombs, the disciples took refuge in the Valley's crypts, lighting torches and fires of the dead. Upon discovering the tomb of Ragnos' ceremonial entrance, disciple Tavian Aximus attempted to resurrect the Dark Lord using his scepter. The Valley was then attacked by a strike force of Jedi Knights of Luke Skywalker's rebuilt Jedi Order, with Luke claiming that if Ragnos was resurrected, he would plow through them all. The disciples were wiped out. Jedi Knight Jaden Korr entered the crypt of Ragnos alone and defeated Aximus, who had been possessed by Ragnos' spirit, reanimating and destroying Ragnos' spirit in the process. Now, we go to the last part, the reawakening of the Sith. Korriban shall be as it always was, a graveyard for the darks of the Sith Lords, still whispering within their tombs. It shall always be a source of evil, spawning threats throughout the millennia. During the Second Great Galactic Civil War, former Jedi Asherad Het had amassed a sizable dark-sided force and cult in an old reliquary tomb at the mouth of the valley. The One Sith, as they were known, fiercely dedicated and adherent to Krayt. remained hidden to the Jedi through the inquisitorious Dark Jedi. Almir Ra sought them out for additional training in 41 ABY. While searching for the lost tribe of the Sith in Abeloth in 43 ABY, Jedi Grandmaster Luke Skywalker, his own son in Ben Skywalker, as well as Jedi Jaina Solo, his niece, and the captured Sith Vastara Kai went to the Valley of the Dark Lords to hunt their quarry. Despite a faint sense of foreboding, the Jedi did not detect their hidden enemy nearby, as it is believed they used concealment in order to shroud their presence in the Force, as Krait's power was certainly exceptionally potent. At last, in the period of 127 to 130 ABY, 120 years after Sidious's final death, the Sith made their presence known openly under Darth Krait's leadership. The result of his machinations was the Sith Imperial War. Krait's own holocron contained entries relating to how he calls for the Galactic Alliance through meticulous manipulation, and the restoration of the Empire as the dominant galactic power. Striking out from Korriban, the Sith were able to topple galactic regimes and become the dominant power in the galaxy. Maintaining a temple on Coruscant, many Sith remained on Korriban to maintain the temples and tombs there. However, after Krait's death, they once more abandoned the world when the Sith regime was toppled in 138 ABY, possibly signaling the final death of the Valley of the Dark Lords. And so, now, we've surmised the entire history of the Valley of the Dark Lords. And so, we reach the final chapter of this video, that being the layout of the dark side home and power that is the Valley. Something and a quote that Kreia says beautifully describes this in my personal opinion. The structures you see around you are plundered tombs of the ancient Sith Lords. Each tomb was once infused with the history and heritage of the old Sith Empire, containing great mysteries and powerful relics of the Force. However, even the many traps could not hold back the curious, the fools, and the weak, and so these tombs fell, spilling their secrets into the hands of those unable to comprehend or preserve them. The Valley of the Dark Lords was a gargantuan rift and outcropping of stone about 3 days' walking distance to the city of Dreshdek. Wider at the mouth, the valley's stone walls were sheer and steep before opening into a lower valley with coarse outcroppings and rocky mountain ledges. Overlooking the lower valley were 6 towering monoliths in the shapes of humanoid men, signifying the original powerful members of the Sith, bowing their heads. Lining the upper valley's walls were the tombs of ancient Sith, such as Naga Sadow and Ludo Kresh. At the centre of the upper valley was a 3-story crypt containing the remains of Ajunta Paul. The lower valley, once lined with temples and soaring edifices to fallen Dark Lords, which largely obliterated during the Republic bombings and orbital bombardments, and what tombs remained were hidden behind sand and debris. The lost tomb of Marka Ragnos was unearthed bit by the subservient Sith regimes, but eventually lost once more after each defeat. At the mouth of the valley stood the Reclairy of Zozan, a sprawling temple complex upon the leftmost wall of the valley. At the back wall of the Valley of the Dark Lords was the Sith Academy of Korriban, a pyramidal structure which towered over the tombs. The academy was rebuilt several times, while another academy was built in Dreshdek by the Brotherhood of Darkness. So my friends, we come to the end of this video. Be sure to let me know what you want to see next, and if you want more of these documentary style videos covering the darker aspects of the Star Wars galaxy, or just anything in Star Wars. Tell me if you want something in a documentary about the actual Sith Lords, not just the artifacts and homes they inhabit. So my friends, I'll see you in a galaxy far, far away. Be sure to subscribe, and then remember, the Force will be with you, no matter how dark and treacherous the path ahead may seem.